Video time. Thought I'd talk about gender identity for a bit because I'm just a tad curious where atheists stand, at least atheists who watch me. Curious to find out where you guys stand on the notion, and it's a fairly archaic notion, that every human being pops into existence with a predilection to their respective gender role. And the only reason we have males with feminine tendencies and females with masculine tendencies is because of unnatural upbringings, where the son, for instance, the lack of a strong father figure being imposed on the psychology of the son early on in the son's life would greatly contribute to turning the boy into a fruit. Seems silly, obviously, but when you look at what some of these professionals are saying, and even when you look around, these atheist gatherings, which FYI, I've decided to quit calling it a community finally, so gatherings it is from now on. But when you look around at what goes on here, the unfounded and just downright laughable authority of gender role science, blatant faulty foundation of it, the fact that it's just utter bullshit, is not being taken to to its fullest logical conclusions. Because even here, you're still going to see the prevalence of gender role focus. A lot of atheists still believe that gender roles are imprinted into our genetics, respectively. When you point out to them how it's all made out of basically the psychology of every human being from the moment of birth having been bombarded with societal constructs of appropriate gender attributes. And the moment of birth part is not to be undermined, because it really is the moment of birth is when we start doing this shit to people. Just look at products. Just look at products labeled appropriate for male toddlers, and then look at those aimed at female toddlers. And even as infants, there's huge distinctions in terms of what kind of products we surround male babies with in contrast to the female ones. So that's all it is. Aside from estrogen and testosterone, both of which are interchangeable within the sexes, the rest strictly falls under creation and just constant perpetuation of this culturally imposed synthetic descriptions, which really just do a stand-up job of carrying within themselves this aura of natural, damn near pseudo-scientific authority, presenting itself as healthy, and not only healthy, but also just sort of the only way to live a normal life type of propaganda. I'm not one to look at popular forms of any given entertainment medium and draw from those this conclusive evidence that the influence of that entertainment is solely or even partly responsible for whatever contemporary crap is going on in the real world, where there are these half-assed statistics being presented showcasing this matching line of those who purchased the whatever item. Let's say it's video games, the most common one. But yeah, they'll whip out these statistics demonstrating how there's, for instance, tons of 17-year-old teens buying speed racing games, and then showing the number one demographic of people who speed race falling into the 17-year-old bracket. But obviously, it doesn't take two brain cells to figure out that in most cases the video game was at best a temporary distraction from the kid going out and speed racing at an earlier time, or at worst, it's merely a stepping stone to the kid actually speed racing at some point down the road. But the video game itself, was never the seed that generated the interest in speed racing. The seed is elsewhere. And that's why speed racing games were put on the market in the first place, because the suits did their job right and sniffed around enough to find out that there's already enough demand for that shit as it is. So why bring this up? Well, because I don't think that there are zero exceptions to this rule. The rule of entertainment versus influence. Because it's just crystal clear to me that when it comes to gender roles, pop culture, comedy culture, Hollywood, all these forms of entertainment and I guess art, are the seed that imposes itself on the psychology of new generations. And you might think it's, parents who mostly enforce this idea of organic gender codes in their kids' minds, but I say it's mostly entertainment driven, because we see kids rebel against what's expected of them by their parents, and they rebel in accordance to alternative influences often brought on by pop culture, rap culture, etc. But when it comes to gender roles, every single mainstream form of entertainment goes hand in hand with the well-accepted traditional notions of reality. So the legitimacy of the parental dynamic is only being reinforced through outside forces when it comes to gender, at least the mainstream ones. Because unlike so many other unfounded notions of traditional reality, when it comes to gender roles, there's absolutely no there's no sense of dichotomy. You can't find it. Even in gay culture, which, you might argue that, well, you got drag queens running around and you got all these men speaking in Valley Girl accents, so that's progress, right? But it's not, because the feminine qualities are only brought upon by the fact that these men have something in common with a traditional feminine trait, and that being sexual attraction to men. I mean, there's the catch. So, until the day comes where we see a straight man wearing high heels and speaking in a Valley Girl accent without the automatic assumption that he must be gay for it, i.e. having something in common with the traditional feminine quality, which is attraction to men. Not that I'm saying I'm dying to see fully grown men speak in Valley Girl accents, but I'm just saying, until that day comes where men act like women and aren't assumed to be gay for it, until we see that, this drag queen crap, this dress up crap, is not progress. It's false progress. I'd even call it anti-progress, because again, it just reinforces the well-established bullshitism that our personality, our characteristics are derived from a genetic disposition, and whether that's gender focused or sexual orientation focused, there's no difference between the two, because it still insists upon this mainstream idea that our behavior and the way we speak, what clothes we like, just generic style preferences, it insists that those are bound to either our gender or our sexual orientation. And they're not contingent upon those. They're not reserved for anything but our nurture, our exposure to the environment we grew up in. And currently there's a hell of a lot of pollution in that environment created by pop culture. Just various forms of entertainment. And of course religion plays a role too, to an extent. But I'm mainly focusing on secularists, on progressives, and why so many of them perpetuate the idea that there's any legit science pointing to gender codes. And in the case of males, a lot of it has to do with misogyny. Just think about it. I mean, what do men who, when they want to ascribe a cowardly trait to another man, what do? They call him a girl. A girly man, a pussy, and it's supposed to be really insulting, right? Being called one of those. And then they go on to talk about how they love women and how they got no problem with women. But they can't see the obvious connection being played out in their subconscious between femininity and cowardice. I mean, there's no other way to interpret an insult directed at a man by another man consisting of nothing but, "You're a girly man." What other conclusion can you draw there but the belief that men are superior and being compared to women takes something away from them? And I see so much of that on here, in this enlightened community. Well, I guess I call it a community again, but fuck it. Yeah. I mean, you don't see the inverse of that with women, though. I don't see it. I don't see women insulting each other by calling each other manly woman. So that's a bit strange. Also, still don't see why one woman going around fucking a bunch of men should be looked at any differently at all than one man going around and fucking a bunch of women. But we do look at it differently, drastically differently, because we still have this idea, even as atheists, we have this idea that sex is basically women doing men a favor. Women giving it up to the man. We just have such unfounded conclusions about our gender roles. And the only role I see a need for is one that acknowledges the physical differences. And that's it. But we've just taken that, and with the help of culture, we've ran with it. And we built these huge codes of, codes and conducts of absolute, unfounded, shallow bullshit that every new generation just takes at face value. Case in point would be that what Captain Austin did about 10 months ago, and just how many enlightened atheists truly felt that he deserved to get assaulted for it. I mean, here's a 130-pound kid, of course, did a stupid thing, but at the same time, he's completely and utterly defenseless. Probably as defenseless as most women would be, and yet it would be okay to assault him just because he happened to have been born with a chromosome permitting for his assault. I mean, we really have to change this bullshit presumption of gender identity. Especially in the manner when all these androgynous characters are always being presented on TV. Because apparently, unless you ascribe somebody predominantly masculine or feminine traits, that character will undoubtedly be a quirky oddball with absolutely no sense of rationality or any regular human being type social skill. And I know it's entertainment, but it's in every form of entertainment. So to deny